Back at it here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. Soren Petro, Rany Jazayerli with you. Much to cover tonight as the spring training days. We're at least in the right calendar year, right? Spring training actually not that far away. I think we're less than a month away from spring training. We'll talk about what the overall expectations should be for this ball club in 24. What is the best this rotation can be? Can it be the best rotation in the American League Central? How powerful will the lineup be? Are there 4, 5? How many 30 home run hitters? Anybody else that can add to this lineup? Do the Royals have enough bullpen? Who's the closer? Can they compete for a division championship? What are the thoughts on the non-roster invitees? And we ran the simulation on our all-time Royals again. This time, maybe I squeaked something out. I don't know. We'll find out. Right now, it's the Kaufman Corner podcast. Right now.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis, and welcome to the Kaufman Corner podcast. Proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember we stream live. You can be a part of the conversation. We do it every Sunday night at 10. Usually, I guess I should say every Sunday night at 10 is when it ends up coming your way. Thank you for everybody who's joining us in the chat room as we speak. It is certainly a frigid night in Kansas City. Hopefully, Rany, I'm sure it has to be brutally cold in Chicago as well. Here on a Sunday night, the 14th, as we record. How cold is it in Chicago?
It's colder here than it is in Kansas City, and I know it's about 5 below in Kansas City. It's 10 below zero outside, but it's cozy warm inside. And like you said, 4 weeks until spring training starts. If that doesn't warm your heart, then you may not be a baseball fan. So that's something to keep in mind in the worst part of the winter freeze here. You'll be in Arizona, I know, in maybe about 6 weeks. I'm actually scheduled to appear at the Sabre Analytics Conference that takes place March 9th. So already thinking of warmer days ahead, but right now kind of sucks.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about in those warmer days what our expectations are for this ball club. I mean, realistically, what do you have a way that you would phrase it in totality? And we're going to break it down piece by piece here in a second. But overall, now that you've had some time to digest everything, there'll still probably be, as we've pointed out a number of different times, perhaps a move for a left-handed bat. But you got anything to summarize your expectations on this team right now?
I mean, so my evaluation of the offseason is I'm satisfied, right? I'm not thrilled. They haven't made some like incredibly dramatic trade. They haven't made, obviously the long-term contract to Bobby Witt that you and I are both, patiently waiting for has not come to fruition. But I think they've ticked every box that they needed to tick. And I am also satisfied, unlike last winter, with the amount of changes, off the field changes in terms of adding talent behind the scenes. So my expectations going into the season for 2024 are this team will not be an embarrassment. This team will be probably under 500, but respectable. It will be a significant improvement from what it was last year. And my biggest hope is simply that this team, whatever it is, will be the worst Royals team for the rest of the decade. That is my ultimate goal here. As much as I want them to be competitive in 2024, I want them to build something that actually lasts this time. For as long as it took the last time around, and as incredible as the success was, the run of success was basically 3 years. And I would like to see something longer lasting this time around.
I object to that. I'll say it was 5 years. They were in contention into September.
If they'd been, they weren't even over 500. I know what you're saying. Yes, they were in contention, but ultimately they didn't even get above 500 in those last 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. As long as if this year they go 82-80 and lose by a game, and you tell me they're not in contention, then I'll buy that.
Well, you know what? I'll say this
because that's the big hype now. Is like, well, in this division, well then, which is fine. Everybody can have that, but don't tell me that it's a success then if you lose the division by 1.
I will say this: the difference
82 and 80
between 2024 and 2017 even is there are 6 playoff teams and not 5. And so 81, what the Royals did in 2016 to 2017, transported now, they very well might have made the playoffs at 81 and 81.
So why isn't that?
So okay, I'll give you that then. I'll agree in the context of baseball today, what they did in 2016, 2017 qualifies as borderline successful.
Yeah, I think if you're in competition, if you play 5+ months of meaningful baseball, I'll consider it a success, particularly in a small market. I think you're grading to be negative, to be honest with you. It's kind of my feeling when you have, when you're going about it that way. Like I think you just want to you want to be down on the club. They were in contention and making moves to add to the roster. And if we got that kind of year, if you got 2017 this year, would it be a success?
Yeah, I'll give that to you. If the arc of the season, the fact that they were, essentially buyers at the deadline and in contention into September, by our by our admittedly lowered standards, yes, that would be a success. I'll give you that.
Yeah, there will be a clown car on smoke. Okay, I like that. That's an interesting angle on it there. Listen, I do think I'm not sure that they're ready to compete, but I do like the dynamics of where they are. I think they're at least now at a point where they don't have 10 ifs, right? Like, maybe I think it gets easier if we just start diving into the breakdown of things. Let's start with, where we expect this rotation to be. By the way, we're proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at gannasphalt.com. Can this be the best rotation in the American League Central? Let's start there. And if it is, that's a long way towards being a contender in baseball. Do you think that this can be the best rotation in the American League Central?
Can it be? Yes, if everything goes right. But when I match up this rotation to the other rotations in the division, even among teams like the Guardians, the Twins that haven't done much or have actually, in the case of the Twins, he lost Sonny Gray, Kenta Maeda. I'm not sure. I think it would be a big ask. And we can break it down. I mean, for one thing, okay. I'm going to put the White Sox aside, right? The White Sox have an ace in Dylan Cease, but everyone expects him to be traded between now and the beginning of the season. Assuming he does, then that's a team, that's a rotation that doesn't match up. But at the same time, that's a team that's really not sure if it's trying or not right now. So we'll put the White Sox aside. You look at the Guardians. Shane Bieber, is close to a year after year number one starter as this division probably has had, right? Tristan McKenzie was right on the verge of being a number one starter and then missed 2023, most of the entire season. Question mark.
So he's an if, yeah.
He's an if, but he's actually been like not just a good starter, he's been like borderline number one. Tanner Bybee was really, really good as a rookie last year. He's basically a Shane Bieber starter kit. Shane Bieber, I think, was a 4th-round pick out of, I want to say UC Santa Barbara. Tanner Bybee was a 5th-round pick out of Cal State Fullerton. So like mid-round college, college starter from California. Good command, gained stuff as a pro. Good, from an organization that knows how to develop pitchers. And as a rookie, was like a well above average starter. Like they have a top 3 that's hard to compete with.
Yeah, but the one thing I would push back on is enjoy the 98 innings you're going to get from Bieber. Right? I mean, he's thrown over 130 innings once in the last 3 years. He did throw 77 innings in 2020, which was the full go, but it was a shortened year. So, I mean, We're looking at a guy who in his career has thrown 114, 214, 77, 96, 200, and 128 innings. So, like, yes, I think he's outstanding, with also the likelihood that he is actually out there for more than 2/3 of the year is not good.
Okay. How many innings did Seth Lugo throw over the last
Oh,
4
I'm with you. I'm
Right.
with you.
I mean, that's the thing. This is
I think
modern baseball now.
the answer to the question, is it the best rotation? No, it's the Indians that have the best rotation. But I do see that you mentioned McKenzie. I mean, they have a history of developing pitching. They have a history of it being hurt too.
Yeah, they do. They do. But I mean, the Guardians are just one. The Tigers are the sneaky good rotation
Agreed.
in this division, right? I mean, think about it. The Central is so weird because the teams that we think of as being, good in this division, historically, at least in the last couple of years, the Twins and Guardians have done nothing to maintain their position at the top for financial reasons, whether justified or not. The Twins don't really have a TV contract for the upcoming year, and I think they're being very hesitant to spend any kind of money until they know how much TV revenue they have coming in. And then the Guardians are cheap every winter. But those are teams that have not just, the Guardians had an off year last year, maybe in part because they're not spending money, but they have as good a development system as any team in the division. They've obviously been, contenders in previous years. The Guardian and the Twins won the division. But then two teams who historically have been, at the bottom of the division for the last couple of years, the Tigers and the Royals, have actually been very aggressive about signing free agents this winter. The problem for the Royals is, the Royals are starting from a 56 win base. The Tigers won 78 games. They actually finished in second place in the division last year, and they're also spending some money. So that makes me nervous. I mean, they brought in Kenta Maeda, who is a guy, again, pitched only about 100 innings last year, and I think he missed a year before that. But, when healthy, he's a decent starter. Jack Flaherty, huge question mark, but he was, one of my top two free agent targets for a reason. The upside is very high. And then Tarek Skubal, their number one starter. I mean, I believe his FIP this year was in 2023 was 2.00. Like he was only about a half a season. So again, it's very hard to find anybody capable of being a really good starter and also throwing, 150 innings. He threw 80 innings, but 80 innings, 58 hits, 14 walks, 102 strikeouts. So, and then the Guardians have a very good top three with Pablo Lopez. The Twins with Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan, and Bailey Ober. So all three of those teams can match up with the Royals, and they have, I think, a longer pedigree of success, or at least of number two upside. The Royals with Waka and Lugo, I think, are set with number three starters, and Cole Reagans is their entry into the potential ace department. I worry that the other teams, though, have two or three guys who might pitch at a number two starter level compared to the Royals, where they only have Reagans.
I think it's a fair assessment, but I think you glossed over Maeda's actual innings pitched way too fast. He's thrown 276 innings in the last 4 years. Granted, 2020 is one of them. You want to kick that out? He threw 66. He's thrown 210 in the last 3.
Yeah, absolutely fair.
So,
absolutely fair.
They're going to need somebody else in addition to him. So I'm with you. And as I look through the different rotations, what I came away with, yes, I would give the nod on, if we said it's Stratomatic, they're all going to make all their starts. Yes, the Royals aren't number one. They're probably not number two. The question is who can stay healthy. So I think health is going to be big when it comes to the rotation breakdown. And I think for the Royals, I think what you hope is that Lugo and Waka can be what they were. Lugo as a starter last year, and Waka can be what he was last year. And then Cole Reagans, somewhere somebody else has to take a step.
Right.
They have to, because everybody else will have somebody take a step. I know the Royals have made it seem like that's an impossibility to expect somebody to get better from year over year, but that's actually how it works when you build from within. You mentioned in talking about the Tigers and Skubal. I mean, he's a guy that came up his first year. He looked kind of like a Royals guy, 5.63 ERA. Granted, a 122 whip, which to me always foretells success, and that was in a handful of innings, 7 starts. 434 the next year, but then 352, 280. He is, and you mentioned a FIP, was it FIP or XFIP? I can't remember which it was, a 2.00,
mm-hmm.
right? So, I get it, but that's where Cole Reagans has to match him. That's what Cole Reagans has to do. Reagans has to be the good Cole Reagans that he was when he first came over, when he first got into the rotation. And then a Brady Singer has to take a step forward. A Lynch has to take a step forward. I think if Lugo and Waka and Lyles can be handled in short bursts and hopefully moved out of the rotation somewhere along the way, because at least one, if not two guys have stepped forward, then I think you've got a rotation that can compete. If they can be good enough, if the lineup's better and if the bullpen's better, they can be good enough. And so I think they're in competition when it comes to the rotation. I think the rotation, can we say that they're competitive at the rotational level?
I agree. I like you said, I think that part of the reason they signed Waka and even Lugo, and I mean, take it back a year, even a Jordan Lyles, is that the Royals value innings. They value the ability to take the ball every fifth day. Lugo is really the gamble here in the sense that they believe his arm is the fact that he has not thrown 140 innings consistently over the last 5 years is not because he was not physically capable of taking the ball. It's because he was in the bullpen, right? Which is a much better excuse for not throwing 140 innings than Kenta Maeda being like hurt, right? They think that his arm is actually fresh, that he was capable of doing it. So the fact that he wasn't asked to is probably means he's got more bullets left in that arm. But we'll need to see that. I actually I agree with them. I think that there was for a long time this fear in the sport about increasing a pitcher's innings from 1 year to the next by too many, or the so-called Verducci effect. If you increase your innings totals by more than 30 innings from 1 year to the next, you're much more likely to get hurt. Every study that's looked at this has shown no correlation whatsoever. And I personally think it's bunk. And I think that, a guy who's been in the bullpen for years and years, it doesn't mean he can't suddenly go from throwing 70 innings to 150 innings if you manage it correctly. And it might mean that his arm is fresh. I think it's very interesting. Yesterday, Jordan Hicks signed with the San Francisco Giants, a 4-year, $44 million contract, which, one of the largest contracts. When it was first announced, I'm like, wow, that's a ton of money for a reliever. And then they announced, we're going to move. The Giants are going to consider moving him to the rotation for a guy who's never pitched, as far as I can remember, never pitched out of the rotation. But they think his arm can handle it. The fact that he's been in the bullpen but been able to pitch does not preclude him from doing it. So I think Lugo is really the linchpin of this strategy. If he can hold up and throw about as many innings as he did last year, 140 plus innings, I think that the Royals rotation will be competitive with all these other teams. But I'm going to ask you a question here. I'm going to throw something inflammatory out. Do you think rotations matter as much as they used to?
No, of course not. They don't throw as many innings. Obviously, they don't matter.
But I don't think I don't know if that's fully sunken in to, if not the industry, certainly to the fan base. Let me ask you this. How many pitchers in the American League last year, had a 4-win season? 4 wins above replacement by Baseball Reference.
Geez, I have not looked that close at that kind of thing. 15?
4.
Okay.
One of them was Shohei Ohtani. Right. The other 3, Garrett Cole, who's really like, the last of the aces, certainly in the American League. Like, you think of Verlander, and just 5 years ago, Verlander and Scherzer, and Clayton Kershaw. Garrett Cole's, you want a guy who can throw 210 innings. We're not even asking 260 anymore, or 240 even. It's 210 is like league leading total, and to be exceptional for 210 innings. It's Garrett Cole, and then Sonny Gray, who is no longer a Twin, Kyle Bradish of the Orioles, and then Shohei Ohtani. That's it. 4 wins. That's all we're talking about. I don't have the number here for hitters. I think it's like 25, maybe. I'm extrapolating here, but it's a huge gap. And so this idea that this is why in the draft, for instance, you focus on hitters. It's not just that pitchers are risky. It's that you can't get as much value out of them. And so when I evaluated teams pitching, I don't even know how important it is to look at the individual pitchers so much as the organization's ability to get all of their, to make their pitchers better, because you're going to need 15 pitchers, to get through 80% of your innings. Like, you can't just rely on 5 or 6 or 7 guys the way you could even 10 or 15 years ago.
I looked it up, and I think about 10 years ago, when the Royals were coming to fruition, like maybe 12, 13, it was on average playoff teams used 8 starters. Right? Like that's what it took to get through the year. And I think that might be more because they're all more max effort guys now and they all break down probably more now. So I think your point is valid. So if we expanded this out, that's where the Royals start to get iffy because then you start to say Lynch, Bubic coming along at some point. Like who are the other guys? You go down into the minor leagues and listen, I don't know. Everybody might be that thin, right? When it gets there.
Well, and that's why it's about which organizations have shown an ability to take, to find somebody mid-season, take some guy in the minor leagues that's not impressive, and squeeze, 12 starts and a 4.50 ERA out of him. Like what teams can? That's one of the reasons why the Dodgers are just at a level above everybody else. Is that they'll draft some dude in the 8th round, and a year later he's a top prospect, and they'll take a guy who's in AAA and pitching well, but guys in AAA come up and get beat up all the time. And when their guys comes up, he pitches well. Like they've mastered the art of developing pitchers, not just one or two or three guys. Every guy in their organization is a little bit better by being in that organization.
Yeah, and I think for me, I hear what you're saying that it's less important, but it's still important, right? Like they still have to, and I think those 2 starters are going to be essential to their success this year. So I think they are much better. And I think a lot of it, we had a question that was here in a 5-man rotation. Where do you place? John asked us, where do you place Singer? And I think that's a big one. I was reading, I think it was, I don't want to credit the wrong person, but if Singer comes along, if Singer gets back to looking like the guy he was 2 years ago, and Reagan's is who he was, that's 2 ifs, right? Because I would expect Reagan's to be somewhere in between what he was just at the beginning and where he was at the finish. All right, now it starts to look really good because now you're talking about the 2 guys you had to be in 3s and 4s.
Right.
But I don't know that I expect that from Singer. Like, what's your expectation for Singer and where he will fit this year?
I mean, I think he goes into the season as the number 4 starter. And they brought in Walker and Lugo precisely to let Singer be that number 4 and earn his way back to being the number 2. And I think that's what they certainly hope he will. I think he's capable of it. I think having a full spring training and not pitching 3 innings in a month because of the World Baseball Classic will help. But when we talk about ifs, he's probably the biggest if in terms of performance.
Can we agree that if they win the division, he's 1 or 2?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, if they're going to win, they if they hit their 90th percentile projection, because that's what we're talking about here, right? For them to make the playoffs, it's probably a 10, maybe let's say 20% chance. If they do, something went really right for them, and Brady Singer is probably at the top of the list of things that would have to go right.
Yeah, I think that's, to me, and I think somewhere along the way, Chris Bubic or Daniel Lynch or some other young guy has to emerge and move Jordan Lyles out.
Right.
Like
yeah, no, to me, what I'm looking for, one of the top things I'm looking for in spring training is, does someone else beat Jordan Lyles out for the 5th spot in the rotation? I think Bubic won't be ready till midseason. We know that. But Daniel Lynch is the guy I'm really looking forward to, stepping up in spring training. I think they would love to see him win it. He has to earn it. That's one of the differences, right? He has to earn that spot. But if he does, and he pushes Lyles into the bullpen, you might improve 2 spots.
Can we also agree on this? There's no way for anybody to earn a spot. If the other 5 stay healthy, there's no way any of them earn. I'm tired of competitions against batters that are going to be hitting in AA. Stop that. Like no one else uses spring training to figure out who it is. If you're trying to figure something out based upon a few spring training innings, you're screwed. The answer is none of the above. So Lynch and Bubic is rehabbing, but Lynch and everybody else goes to the minors. That has to happen. If somebody gets hurt, fine. The best of the bunch can be slotted in there. There is no reason for Daniel Lynch to break with this club. None other than an injury.
Well, obviously injury. I mean, with rotations, that happens anyway, right? So you need to have that 6 starter ready to go, and that's a big part of the possibility he'll make the rotation. But I will say with pitchers, when you talk about earning it, I don't even mean by he struck out a bunch of guys who were an A-ball last year in a spring training start. I'm talking more about metrics, like if his velocity's up. His velocity has been down a little bit the last couple of years. If he comes in and he's throwing 94, averaging, or his spin rate, like they're looking at other things, that might be the thing that gets him over the top.
That'd be great. I'd be like, boy, it looks like you're going to be off to a great start in AAA. We'll check back with you, but like you can't. You have to value major league production. He has none.
Well, that's why
Because
it's precisely because I value major league production that I don't want Jordan Lyles in the rotation.
right,
So this
right.
is less about Lynch, I think, than it is about just if you actually have playoff aspirations for 2024, I really would prefer not to have Jordan Lyles in the rotation. I've said this before. I think having him as starting the season as a long man on the bullpen, he could provide some real value there and work his way into a meaningful role there.
I think he could too. And while his ERA, he hasn't. He actually has in the past when not asked to try to go into a seventh inning and see guys. He has had success when he was with contending teams. He's had success because contending teams have real bullpens, and he's the fifth starter, and they don't ask him to go deep because the other three guys previous were snot-nosed rookies who couldn't get past the third inning, and there's no bullpen left. I think he goes in at number 5. I don't think there's any reason to put Lynch up there. Let Lynch go down, pitch. Of all those, if the velocity's there, all the metrics there, great. But the guys that have done it are going to do it. There's no way to earn it over guys that have been there and done it in the big leagues. He at least gives you innings, and you start with that. If Lynch is lights out in AAA, and you're looking at the exact same thing from Lyles, fine. Flip it. Send him back to the bullpen. But coming out, I think there needs to be a statement. Nobody gets a free pass. And it's based upon what you do when you're called upon in innings that matter. I'll tell you what matters is not having liability issues in your parking lot, not risking accidents. Gann Asphalt and Concrete can help you out with that. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear for businesses since 1994. Get your parking lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot will cut down on accidents and keep your lot as safe as possible. Are you ADA compliant? They can do ramps. They make sure the signs are there. All the signs, the curbing that you need, the parking curbs, all of it, anything and everything that has to do with the parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Find them online at gannasphalt.com. Let's talk about the lineup. We'll come back to the bullpen here in a second. Well, let's talk about the lineup. One of the things that I like is I think there is Salvador Perez, Bobby Witt Jr., Hunter Renfroe, who have all hit 30 home runs in a season, Vinny Pasquantino, and Nelson Velasquez that look like they could.
Right.
Okay? I don't think all 5 guys are going to top 30 home runs. But if all 5 guys would, dare I say, average 30 home runs?
That's even 25. That's 125 just from those 5 guys.
Yes.
And let's
that's my next question is there anybody else who can even scare 20?
Melendez. I would put MJ Melendez. If we're talking about if the Royals win the division, like is Singer number 2. If the Royals win the division, if the Royals make the playoffs, I think that means MJ Melendez has had at least a minor breakout season, right? Like the Royals are going to sink or swim with him. They got rid of Edward Olivares. They're going with MJ Melendez. He has had a full, winter knowing that he's a corner outfielder. So I am hoping that we will see his defense upgraded to at least passable. And they believe in the bat enough to give him the chance to be, to start every day. I think this is the man who once led the minor leagues in home runs. Like you don't have to project that much to assume he could hit 20 home runs, maybe even 25 in the major leagues.
Yeah. I think you got to project a lot because he's got one decent minor league season under his belt, and somehow that's made him a legitimate prospect. He was not a first-round pick. He was a second-round pick. Pedigree matters. It's not really there with him, and I think that's projecting a lot. Like last year does not look like an anomaly. Last year looks like every year of his minor league existence except for one. And so I heard JJ Piccolo. I can't remember if he said it to me in the interview we had, but talk about how he's got power. He's going to hit for power. I hope that's salesmanship. I hope he is selling another organization. In fact, I'll go so far as to say they can't win the division if MJ Melendez is on the big league roster.
That's a pretty strong statement that you're saying if they make the playoffs, that it's.
I think if they make the playoffs. Yeah, I think if they make the playoffs, they trade him before the season starts.
I just think at this point they've made that decision. That's the one that we've talked about. The one trade, the one thing they haven't done this winter is the trade that hurts. I don't know how much it even hurt, but the trade where they give up talent in order to get talent. Edward Olivares is gone. That doesn't really qualify, right? That's not a big enough statement there. But it's if they do, then yes. I mean, obviously, then that will be a statement in itself that they don't believe in MJ Melendez. My assumption at this point is that by not trading him to this point, that they do. The one other guy I want to
what trades have happened this offseason though? None,
you're
really,
saying
right?
in baseball in general,
Yeah.
you're saying a few, not many. The Cubs just traded for Michael Busch from the Dodgers. Like basically, most of the trades are the Dodgers have more talent than they can put on a 40-man roster, and so teams are just going to LA.
And I'm talking about, yes, there have been a number of those, and the Royals have been on the receiving end of a couple
Exactly.
of those, right?
Right,
But
but
I'm
there's no
talking about,
big trades. Yeah,
yeah, like we're moving, we know this in our years, so we're selling salary for prospects, or even we're shaping our roster. You're shaping your roster.
there's the Soto trade to New York, obviously. Right, but that's his last year of his contract. That's not the kind of trade the Royals would.
No, but that's what I'm talking about. That's the one, right? And so my point to that is, I'm not giving up on Melendez being traded. I think that the trade season is about to come. There's so many. I think what's holding things up, and I think baseball's got to figure something out because their offseason sucks. All right, it's terrible. You get a little blip of Juan Soto gets traded, and that's it. You get Shohei Ohtani signs, and that's it. What else have we had this offseason from a big picture baseball? Royals have had their flurry of moves, but nothing. And if you look, there are still big guns out there, lots of them, right? And it's going to walk right up to and into spring training again this year, which one speaks to the fact that every player and agent thinks they don't need the full spring training, right? And they're using that as part of the equation. But I think it handcuffs the trade season because, well, we don't want to trade for a guy. We still might get Cody Bellinger.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I don't know if there is a way to solve that because the difference between baseball and then football and basketball in terms of the economic structure is there's no salary cap. And if there's a salary cap, then the motivation for the players is to sign quickly before teams run out of salary cap space, right? Which is why once the signing window opens, you've got a flurry of deals, right? The first 24 hours of free agency is frenetic because there's a fixed pot of dollars for teams to spend and for players to get. And you don't want to be the last man standing in the musical chairs game. Baseball doesn't have a salary cap. And however you feel about that, that's a big, that is not something they're going to change for the sake of making their offseason better. That has been the subject of strikes and labor strife for decades. That's not going to change just because, the offseason is kind of boring. So
I the one thing I'll say is that, I saw the stat that I think we're less than 50% of the free agent spending this year than we had last year. Now, again, that's where I was like, is that right? And I went back, I started looking, there are still big guns out there to be signed, right? So there's still a lot of money is going to splash around, but I'll bet it still ends up being less than it was last year, which will be a trend of at least like 3 or 4 in a row, or at least 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5, where the spending is going down. Payrolls are coming down. Yep. And at some point, baseball is going to, the Players Association is going to have to stop being ruled by the handful of guys at the top and go, all right, wait a minute, this isn't working. Like we need to tie it to revenue. There are gobs of money coming in, even with and maybe right now isn't that moment with the fall of the RSNs, the regional sports networks, but that day is coming where they got to tie it to revenue.
And that's a big, the fall of the RSN this winter specifically is one of the reasons for the market freeze. I mean, you say less than half, and keep in mind that counts Shohei Ohtani's $700 million contract, right? And it's still less than half. Look at some of these contracts. I mean, Marcus Stroman, signed it. Yeah, he got more than, the Royals were giving Walker or Lugo, but it's like, 2 years and $37 million? 2 years. It's not even so much the money, the per year money, it's the length of the contracts. I mean, I've said this before, the Royals did well to sort of sense that the free agent market's a little bit frozen this year, and you can get guys that in previous years would have needed a 4-year commitment, and getting these guys on 2 or 3 year commitments instead. But that seems to be a definite industry-wide trend. And, from the player's perspective, that has to be concerning. because a lot of teams are just sitting out the free agent market or just dabbling and just being very, very picky. And ultimately, a salary cap, from a principle standpoint is a principle that the Players Association has never been willing to consider, and for understandable reasons. But ultimately, if you're getting paid more money overall, but there's a cap, like the percentage of industry revenues that go to the players in baseball has for years now been less than that in basketball or football. And it's like, do you care about the principle or do you actually care about getting a higher percentage of revenues? I don't know if there's a way to square that circle. I mean, this podcast, this is a topic that would take a lot longer than an hour to get into a lot of detail on. But the industry as a whole, I mean, I know there are people who are really worried at the end of this CBA. We almost, had a strike or a labor stoppage, a lockout this past CBA, and I worry that might happen again next time. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to address the one comment here that says, I can't disagree more with trading MJ right now, right? Like I get it. I do. And it's the exact same thing I heard about Adalberto Mondesi for 4 years. No, you're trading from a point that he's low. Yeah, but you're hoping there's going to be a time that it's high, right? Hope in one hand, crap in the other, and tell me which one fills up faster, right? Like that's what it is. Now, if you're of the opinion, hey, you're wrong, Tubby. MJ Melendez can really rake. He's going to pound the ball over the wall. Okay, fine, but don't be wrong because the Royals pissed away a major asset in Adalberto Mondesi. There were people that would have given him something for him. You have to know your players. Like this is a big test. We've seen JJ Piccolo be very good as a horse trader. Cole Reagans, the relievers he was picking up. He did a fine job. That's great. But you know what else he has to be? Better at identifying his own talent than Dayton Moore was. Because you got to know who is and who isn't. Because they sat around screwing around with Adalberto Mondesi for years. And it was a lost cause. And I spent years talking about and not because I'm a scout, but just I can look at the back of a baseball card. I can see what it is. At some point when it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And that's my point about MJ Melendez. What empirical evidence is there when only one season of his entire professional career is above average that this guy's about to pop?
JJ has shown the ability to buy low, right? What we haven't not seen from him yet is the ability to sell high, right? And that was Dayton's one of Dayton's fatal flaws is he never sold high, except the one time when he sold Will Myers high, and it worked out. As one of the iconic trades in Royals history, and he never did it again. I don't think JJ's had much of an opportunity to do that yet. Again, a lot of the high value that some of these players have lost occurred before his watch, right? MJ Melendez's value was never higher than before he started his major league career. Same thing with Nick Prado. But right now, the Royals are basically, if they keep Melendez, they're basically saying they would rather not sell medium. You're not selling high on Melendez now, but he still has some value. So if you don't believe in him, you can still sell him for something. But at the same time, if they believe, as disappointing as past 2 seasons have been, he had 16 home runs last year, 18 the year, in his rookie year. He was basically a league average hitter. The problem was his defense was so bad, he basically had no value. So the question is, do you believe now if he's just a left fielder, full-time, full stop, that he can develop? I don't know.
I will amend my statement to they cannot win the division if he's on the roster too. They cannot win the division if he has a glove.
Fair. And that's what I'm wondering is, could he just be a DH and just rake if he's just allowed to hit?
And I think he almost has to be part of a platoon of DH. And, which gives him more at bats, his side of the
right. He's a 450 plate appearance monster from the left side. He's
yes.
Kyle Schwarber. If Kyle Schwarber never took the field,
Yes.
Kyle Schwarber, low average. Think of Kyle Schwarber hit like 190 last year and was an above average hitter. I could see MJ Melendez turning into that kind of player. Not a star, but a useful guy. Also, like Schwarber, he's a leadoff hitter, right? He is a very unconventional by sort of traditional standards leadoff hitter. So I think that's where the Royals are banking on now, or maybe they've just looked at the trade market and they're not getting any offers of value for him, and they're just like, well, screw it. Well, he's still pre-arbitration, he's still cheap. Let's give him one more year, and see if we can carve out some sort of role for him.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see what ends up being the case.
So here's the question I have for you, though: is like, could this team, have one of the highest home run totals in franchise history? Because we're talking, I mean, if they, whatever you think of his defense, if he plays every day, he'll probably hit 15 to 20 home runs. Michael Massey hit 15 home runs last year, right?
I think
mean,
he
quietly, so
I
they hit 160, 170, 180 home runs as a team? Maybe.
I think they could. But I worry about the rest of the lineup, right? That to me is my fear is like you got the big, but the guys you mentioned, Massey, 15. Could he be if he clicks and it's 22 home runs from second base? If Garcia finds some power, if Drew Waters, but now we're going if.
Right. Well, and then the problem is Kyle Isbell has like very little power. Michael Garcia hits the ball hard as hell, but hit like 2 home runs as a rookie. So there are some spots where they have very little power. Like
and we love the power that Velasquez showed, but that's a big if. It's an if Renfroe can still do it. It's an if Vinny Pasquantino can stay healthy enough to do it, right? And be hot. We know he was off to a slow start last year. Was all said and done. All right, let's move to the bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
How good is the bullpen, relatively speaking? Is it good enough to be a divisional champion?
With the caveat, the bullpens obviously have the highest variance, the highest unpredictability of any, position group in the sport. Sure, it can, but that you're banking on at least 2 breakouts from that bullpen, which is not unrealistic because breakouts in the bullpen happen all the time. I think it projects on average to be a below average, but not worse than the league style bullpen. I mean, last year was one of the 3 or 4 worst in the league, which is an opportunity to improve. And obviously, Will Smith and Chris Stratton and Nick Anderson should improve it. I think this is, on paper, I don't know, the 20th best bullpen in baseball, but there is upside here for sure with MacArthur, McMillan, Carlos Hernandez, if he could, figure out what he was doing for about 3 months in the middle of last season.
I think what that there's where I have optimism because I think he slots right into the middle.
Right.
I think you've got 5 guys ahead of him at the back end. And so to me, I think he wilted when the pressure got on him. I think he likes those middle innings. I don't think he's got the endurance to start, and I don't think he's got the moxie to be at the back end. And so I expect him to be pitching free and easy, couple good innings for this team on a regular basis in the middle, where I think his mental psyche is best used.
Well, and I think the Royals have no intention of letting him pitch in, 8th or 9th inning situations, certainly to start the season. Like they've brought him for whether or not that was the primary motivation. I don't necessarily think so, but like one of the added benefits of bringing in Smith and Stratton is, that he can pitch the middle innings to start the year. And the one guy, I look at the depth chart for the Royals, like online, the one guy's not even listed, who I really think is the wild card. And could, in a best case scenario, be a huge part of the bullpen, if not the rotation, is Alec Marsh. Alec Marsh, was exasperating in the minor leagues because he had swing and miss stuff. He had great strikeout totals, and his performance otherwise was terrible. It was a lot better this year. He got to the major leagues, and it was still bad, but it wasn't any worse than it was in the minor leagues. Like, you could definitely see the stuff there. He is one of the guys. He hasn't clicked completely with the new pitching development routine, regime, like O'Regan's did. But I think we started to see a transformation. He's given some interviews about the things that he's doing differently, or he did differently in 2023 compared to 2022. So he is a guy. We talk about spring training. Yeah, guys have to earn it, and he may have to go back to AAA for a while. That's fine, but he's really one of the guys I want to see what he's showing in spring training.
I would say that a guy could earn a spot in the bullpen.
Okay.
Right? Because I think there are spots that are open. I think there's 5 spots taken. 6. Let's throw Hernandez in there. 6. Mm-hmm. I think Hernandez. So there's 2 spots to be had. And if you want to know the 5 are Will Smith, MacArthur, Nick Anderson, Stratton, McMillan, and Hernandez.
Right.
They're probably going to put Josh Taylor out there for 7. They gave him 1.1.
He's the guy. I don't understand the contract, but in part, not just because it's not a lot of money. With so many options for those last 2 spots, I don't know if you really want to be committed to a Josh Taylor. But
and we saw them, sign and then cut him. Went on to the Orioles. That was the bane of everybody's existence. The first baseman, outfielder.
Oh, right. Ryan O'Hearn.
Ryan O'Hearn, and then walk in spring training. And so maybe this is something similar that they're going to do when it's all said and done. But I think there are a couple of spots, and we should probably, I'm not convinced that Matt Sauer is going to make the team. Just because he's a Rule 5 doesn't mean you have to keep him.
Right, exactly. He's definitely a guy. He has to earn it, like you said. If he earns it, he'll be in the bullpen, and that's fine. There's non-roster invitees, but like Alec Marsh, Steven Cruz is a guy currently listed at like MLB depth charts as being in the bullpen, and I feel like Alec Marsh has a much higher upside than a Steven Cruz type. So Marsh could be the last guy in that bullpen if he earns it in spring training, and I'm completely fine with letting him get the opportunity to earn it. He has to actually show that his command is better, and that he's not so prone to the home run ball. If not spring training, that's early in the season in AAA.
Yeah, no, I think there are at least a lot of possibilities. There are guys with swing and miss stuff. I know there's been a lot of people writing about, chase rate is kind of average, but the swing and miss stuff, all that kind of, like the bullpen actually is showing it, especially in a lot of the pitchers in the minor leagues are showing swing and miss, right? Which is, now I also believe that you can inflate that by leaving guys down in a level that they've mastered. And I think the Royals were doing that last year, to which I thought was to precipitate a trade of one of those guys to move them, be like, okay, look, the swing and miss stuff is here, and they would be packaged.
Well, the problem is if every other team is onto what you're trying to do, then they're not going to be nearly as impressed by those swing and miss totals and aren't going to give you what you want in a trade, right? Like the industry is advancing at the same time. But to kind of to wrap all this up about the bullpen and the rotation, the point I was making about individual pitchers are not as valuable as they used to be. Pitching as a whole is, right? And so much of, an organization's ability to get, results from its pitching staff is less about one or two individual people and more about the program, right? So that's why you and I have been on the issue of the Royals hiring people for the front office, hiring people to, improve the pitching staff. We talked about, last week, I think I mentioned that the Royals had hired a guy from Driveline to be an amateur scouting analyst. I don't know if you saw, the news this week, a guy named Sam, I believe it's Sam Eads tweeted out, I'm thrilled to announce that I'm joining the Royals as a minor league pitching coach. Where is Sam from? Sam was working at Tread. Tread is the place where Cole Reagans became Cole Reagans. So, and whereas Gabe Levy, the guy who was hired from Driveline, was brought in as an amateur scouting analyst, this guy's actually being brought in as a pitching coach. And you think about it, whenever you see the Royals or to be fair, any organization send a pitcher or one of their pitchers goes to one of these private, essentially pitching academies and comes back with a new pitch or more velocity or whatever, the question is always, why is it that a major league organization needs to rely on an outside operator? Why can't they do it themselves? Well, credit to the Royals then for essentially asking the same question. It's like, how can we bring this in-house? Well, one of the ways they can do that is to hire people who've done it. So this is another really small under the radar move, but 3, 4, 5 years from now, that might be more important than some non-roster invitee that will be in spring training for 3 weeks.
There's no cap on how much you spend on coaching as well. So if you can find quality people, go get them. Speaking of quality people, with free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews, and every project with Gann Asphalt and Concrete coming with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. The best around is Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. Rany, let's talk about the spring training invitees. Anything in there catch your fancy that you're excited about?
I mean, they're non-roster invitees, so by definition, they're not going to. No one
on that level exciting as an invitee,
as an NRI. A couple of them. Dan Altavilla, Altavia, a pitcher who has had a decent amount of success in the major leagues, but has been basically hurt for the last 2 years. He had, I think, Tommy John surgery after the 2021 season. He was actually on a 2-year deal. A lot of guys who have Tommy John, teams will sign him to a 2-year contract. So they're basically under contract during the rehab year, and then they come back the second year. 2023 was his second year. He was with the Red Sox. He pitched 12 minor league innings, but didn't show enough to get back to the majors. He's intriguing because he's got a career 4.03 ERA in the major leagues, and his average fastball velocity was like 96 for most of his career. If the fastball comes back, that's somebody who could be definitely in the running for a bullpen spot. On the hitter side, the one guy who stands out is Mike Brasso, who was with the Tampa Bay Rays, and actually,
how do you pronounce it?
I'm guessing. I've never been the best about pronouncing players' names.
Right, me neither.
But according to Baseball Reference, it is Brasso. They actually have a pronunciation guide for a lot of players, which is always very helpful. And in 2019, 2020, he had a couple of very good partial seasons. I mean, he only had like 250 plate appearances combined. But his career OPS plus is 104 in about a full season's worth of major league plate appearances, 647 in his career. He's at 26 home runs, hit 242 with a 313 on base and a 428 slug. And he's kind of played he played a lot of third base, some second, some first. I see the Royals, especially if you don't believe in Nick Pratto. And at this point, I'm not sure I do, or if I'm the Royals and I want him back, at least I want him to go back to Omaha and do it one more time, prove that you can get rid of those strikeouts. Brasso could actually be a guy kind of like the who was it last year? Tyler Duffy, and who was the other guy who was on the roster? Yeah. Forgettable, but guy who was on the roster for most of the season as sort of the 26th guy, Matt Beattie, and Matt Duffy. Those are the two last year. I could see Brasso ending up in that kind of a role. He's only like 29 years old, and unlike those guys, he actually has some pop in his bat. So those guys could make the roster at some point.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit to get excited about, but not a whole lot. But I think that's actually a positive, right? I think some of it's because we can kind of see all the spots filled. The first time it looks like this is first time in a while, you're not like, well, that guy could be the starting.
Nope. Yes, that would not be good.
I think that's a positive for this ball club. All right, last thing we want to do is we want to update the simulation. Right, we ran the simulation on our all-time Royals team.
We did
our all-time Royals draft. We won't go through the whole thing. Rany and I drafting the best season. You drafted a player, he couldn't be, none of his other seasons can be drafted, and no one else from the year could be drafted. And we went head to head, and Rany beat me in our head-to-head simulations. He drafted a team to try to beat my team, and he did it. But it's been run a different way now.
It has. I asked Cameron Fletcher, who is the guy who kindly agreed to do these simulations for us, to do a separate simulation where instead of it just being you and me head to head for 162 games, it was you and me in a league with real life major league teams, quality teams, world champions. But the
world champions, or were they just 100-win teams?
So I think he ended up doing it. Every team on this list is a team that won the World Series.
Okay.
Or actually, I take that back. Or the 2001 Seattle Mariners. Very, very good teams. I'm not entirely sure why he chose some of these teams. The 1924 Washington Senators are on there for some reason. I mean, they won the World Series, but that's going back a long ways. But the point is, these were good teams, and there were 18 of them, me and you and 16 other teams. So I think he chose only one from each franchise. And my team did very well. I went 97-65, which was tied for the third best record in the league. The 2002 Angels of all teams had 98 wins. But the team with the best record in this simulation was Team Petro, 107.
107
wins, and actually
like a record or something.
Well, you would have. I mean, 107 against the league of champions. You won 107 games, and you were the champion of the League of Champions. You beat the 2004 Boston Red Sox in the World Series in 5 games. No, there was no comeback for this Red Sox team.
No,
there was no moment. No comeback from a 3-0 deficit. Your team shut them down in 5 games. So I find this gratifying, not just because obviously we both declare victory, but also because
Sure.
we both suspected that your team was probably better on a composite level because you built your team to be the best possible team, and I built my team to beat your team, and so my team was better head to head, and that's exactly what the results have shown. So I'm going with that.
I consider it a major success. I thought I was going to get smoked on this thing. So if I can grab any kind of victory, I'll take it. I will take it and run.
And anytime you want to play these teams head to head in Stratomatic, just say the word, man. I'll be at your house with the dice and cards, and we'll find out for sure. The fact that I have 25 years of experience playing Stratomatic and you have 0 is not relevant.
Yeah, no, but I wish I had come across Stratomatic back in the day because I would have enjoyed it. Right now, I'm just swimming in free time. I have 2 kids, one in high school, one getting ready for high school, just nothing but free time. So sure, whenever you want to do it, get your cross country skis on and ski over here. The way things are going right now. No, but I think the bottom line to sum up everything. Listen, and so congrats to you, congrats to me on that. But the Royals have a team that we at least have something to discuss, and that is nice because last year was painful. We can agree on that, right?
It was, and I sincerely, I hope I don't think they will have another season like that. I sincerely hope they do not, because another year like that, and then we really have to talk about changes being made. But
all right, exactly, and we've got the hope of a Bobby Witt Jr. extension being laid out, and we have the hope our buddy Joe Sheehan, we believe, will join us next week, right? Assuming he's healthy.
Yes, if he gets over this bug he's been fighting, and assuming the Royals don't make any dramatic moves, we can always he's available when called upon. So hopefully we'll have him on next week to discuss the Royals and get his take, because I know he's not quite as positive about some of the moves the Royals have made, some of the signings.
Of course he's not.
I know it's shocking to find out that he's more pessimistic about the Royals than I am. That never happens. It's never happened in the 30 years that he and I have been arguing about the Royals, but it'll be good to have him on the show.
Oh, he can't have a live stream of you guys playing Stratomatic would be amazing.
Yes. It would definitely be not safe for work, I'll tell you that.
For sure. With free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews, every project coming with a written warranty, GAN Asphalt and Concrete can keep your parking lot safer. If you own or manage a business, make sure you let them know you heard about us, heard about them from us here at the Kaufman Corner. They can help your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things concrete. Find them online at ganasphalt.com. For Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.